Welcome, everyone, to tonight's episode of Pivotal Change. I am your host, Ryan Conn, and we have a very special show for you. The recent events of the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump is obviously making huge waves, as it should, in the media. And I have assembled a line of guests tonight that are very dear friends of mine that all have very dynamic backgrounds in various areas of law enforcement and government. And we're going to talk all the way through about the local type of preparation and response to the sniper response and the preparation and the communication, all the way to the large scale response of how the entire overall scene should have been set. And we're going to kick off tonight with probably one of the closest to me guests that I've ever had on the show, my very own brother, Ross Conn. Now, Ross is currently serving as a SWAT team leader. He's got over a decade in law enforcement. He has a prior service history in the Marine Corps, and he is just a wonderful individual overall that is just consumed with tactics and keeping people safe and doing the absolute best job he can for the American people. So, Ross, welcome, and thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate it.
It's absolutely my pleasure, I can assure that. And only because we are limited for time, I'm going to go ahead and jump us right into the first set of questions because I want people to get an insight from a mind like yours and how something like this could happen. What should the response be, and what should the follow-up be? So, starting off, give us from specifically a local mindset of how SWAT teams prepare for this, how SWAT teams scout, set up, get in position, and how patrol officers are supposed to coordinate with federal agencies and their roles and their boundaries. What are those dynamics? What are you doing as a SWAT team and a set of patrol officers to secure a scene like this and execute your duties?
Well, that's a good question. Probably start with the Secret Service was coming to town. We have task force agents that work with our police department, work with Homeland Security, DEA, and ATF and stuff like that. So I would hope and assume that Secret Service would contact their local agencies and ask for whatever resources it is that they would need. In regards to that, I'm sure there'd be initial briefs with with Secret Service and what they would want of us, personnel, fill in the gaps and such things like that. So there'd be an initial planning process, and I'm sure they'd be in charge of a good portion of that, and our key leaders would be there. In regards from a team leader's perspective, we would probably get something where you'd have to have, after the planning process, some sort of recon of the site. Is it a good site? Can you use it? Where are areas of it or avenues of attack or approach? Where could you be most vulnerable? Now, a Secret Service, for a certain aspect, their priorities of work is the president, and they have a 360-degree environment, especially if it's outdoors, where they have to be concerned with. So if they can only have so many assets, and the Secret Service is saying personnel was an issue, was what we're hearing, then they're going to focus a lot of their assets in that interior cordon with everything. So for us in law enforcement, they want snipers, we'll give them snipers. They want police officers or deterrents with flashing blue lights in parking lots to stop avenues of approach if someone can't climb up a ladder or an air conditioning unit, whichever one it happens to be right now. Not only that, you'd have people that would be on a post the night or nights prior, not allowing people to get in any sort of position leading up to the event. From that, even though we'd probably be in charge of the outer cordon, there should be cross communication. There should be a command hub, which I'm sure they have. There should be a person from every agency that is there at the command hub as well. Cross communication is key. Not everybody's on the same radio channel or same radio frequency. And not only that, there should be partnerships or buddy teams where maybe a local law enforcement has a Secret Service agent with them. I'm not saying holding their hand, but they're right there for cross communication. Those are options that exist. At this time, I can't say that's what they did. There's a couple what ifs and whys out there right now, and I'm going to let those fill in the blanks as time comes in.
Yeah, that's great. We don't want to do a lot of supposing, so kind of probably painfully summarizing what you're saying to almost too simplified of an approach is that there's going to be incredible preparation. You're going to be putting people and resources in the right places, lots of scouting. You said the buddy teams, you're going to be pairing up, both federal and local are going to be working in tandem together. Secret Service is going to come in way ahead of time and tell you, here's where our gaps are, here are the needs that we need from you. And then everybody's going to be ultimately kind of layer themselves in zones of responsibilities. Again, you said Secret Service is, hey, we're the body of the former president is our primary concern. And you said, hey, if you need dogs, snipers. Now, specifically, some of the logistics and tactical plans. Does it surprise you that there was not aerial coverage of an event like this, even not necessarily helicopters or the lower level airplanes, but even just drones with as cheap and available as those are?
Oh, I absolutely agree. Drones are a great asset, and most drones, or at least for us, police department, they all have thermal FLIRs, all sorts of other options to use. And you can say, okay, hey, only 3 drones are going to be flying up the air at any time, and we know what our drones look like. You see a random drone, you take care of it accordingly. In the military, we have devices. When I was in the military, called Thor systems that jam radio frequencies, high, low, and ultra high frequencies. Now I'm sure nobody's cell phones would probably be working during that if those were going off, but those things exist. Not only that, you have what we had in the Marine Corps called IR strobes. We used them all the time. You can put IR lighting on units, on people, even if they're in plain clothes, and your drones in the sky know where your unit's at or who's talking or who's saying what. If someone had IR strobes, especially snipers or anyone who was an incognito environment or clothing, and their strobe is not working, or they don't have a strobe, that shooter on the roof would have been identified very quickly by a drone that says that person doesn't have a strobe on.
Gotcha.
Again, those are different options, but the fact that there were no air assets is quite shocking.
Yeah, I can agree with that. You obviously know my background, and I think some of the viewers do from the history of the show as well. But so that gets a question going about the responsibilities, and like you said, the equipment and the assets not being used on scene should cause us to scratch our heads a little bit, either from a local or a federal side of things. And again, the federal requests would have been what triggered that. They would have said, "Hey, here's our gaps. This is what we need." Let me get a little bit of clarification, possibly, on some roles of responsibility. This entire event ultimately is under the umbrella of Secret Service. Where do responsibilities and who can make a decision versus have a decision overruled? Are you familiar with any of those protection details? Or if, hey, the Secret Service has the final say. If they want us to go somewhere or not go somewhere, it's really not up to local law enforcement to say, I'm going to breach those boundaries and I'm going to go ahead and do my own thing, because would that cause issues if people just started doing their own thing outside of the requests of some of those Homeland Security, FBI, Secret Service requests?
Yeah, so I can't speak for the Secret Service's SOPs, their standard operating procedures. I don't know specifically what they have entail in that regards. And then you branch off to another category of ROEs, rules of engagement, that you have to deal with. You go into country, rules of engagement are quite different. You go to Iraq, Fallujah, guys talking on a cell phone, maybe it's calling in mortars, and you do what you need to do. You can't do that in country. So your rule of engagement is quite different here. And with the responsibilities for what you're allowed to do to the individual, we all have command. There's command and control that exists. There is all the way back down to you finally get to the individual user, who should be understanding what his commands and his ROEs are. We also know that there are times that someone has to do something that is outside of the original initial command.
Let me jump in there, only because I have a couple more questions, and unfortunately, we do only get so much time to run an episode every night. But the threat, so somebody might have to break outside of the normal realm. So we have some inclinations of a threat. He came with a spotting scope, the rangefinder earlier. Then it was discovered he's climbing on the building. Then it was confirmed he is armed and putting himself into an elevated position. What is the SWAT team, the quick reaction force, the patrol response going to be? We saw them running around the building. What are you aware of as your normal quick reaction force patrol response? Did that look appropriate? Is that what should be happening? And educate the people what would be a normal response if an elevated threat level like that is received.
Yeah, so the SWAT team, one, should be able to, okay, you're saying there's a threat, a possible threat from this location, locate and close the distance, which you're saying that people already have eyes on this individual. So we should be able to try or attempt to be making either contact or lethal contact with this individual if it comes to it. But on the other side, from the Secret Service and protection, if there's a possible shooter, and you're saying there's a possible shooter in an area of an avenue of taking a shot, They should have taken the president off the stage. He should have been pulled off the stage, put him in cover and concealment for 15, 25 minutes, however long it takes to assess, oh, is that a local PD shooter up there that's just finally getting a position or an actual threat? Pretty sure the crowd wouldn't have minded a 15 to 20-minute delay. With that, I've heard rumors that they say that, oh, they maybe thought it was an LEO climbing on the roof, and other stuff, and we're not going to deal with that.
Right.
But you have to have positive identification, especially in CONUS or in country, in regards to what you're going to end up shooting.
Gotcha.
And
so now the shot happens. What's the expected law enforcement response? The shot has happened. The threat to the president has occurred. Counter snipers have engaged. What is SWAT? What is patrol doing in that moment? Shots are fired. What's the expected response?
Okay, so I'm still going to use a Marine Corps acronym called ADRAC, and it basically means attention, description, direction, description, range, assignment, and control. And it pretty much shooter on the roof or on the roof, 100 meters. Someone get up there, get a shot on them, fire at will or something like that. Okay, I'm giving a little bit more of an extreme, but you're going to figure out where the shooter is. And he managed to get 5 or 6 shots off. And after probably 3 or 4, someone should be able to get a pretty good idea where that is and close the distance. Now, the guy is 25 feet up. Field of view could be limited from your position, which obviously matters. And unless you're getting to an extreme distance of probably about 40 or 50 yards and then beyond, you probably don't have a good view on that shooter that's on top of that roof at that elevation. But then again, people are standing and sitting in stands, and they're able to see them. And if you had air assets, it would have been a problem. Oh, I lost you sound-wise.
So very good points. Tell me about leadership. How can a person that's not in law enforcement or government take a leadership lesson away from what happened, what response was given, and how we can apply this to wisdom, other realms of life, not directly related to sniper, counter sniper situations?
Yeah, so from leadership, I hate to say it, but when something goes wrong, it goes all the way to the top. And it sounds like it has been, and we've been hearing different reasonings or excuses or whys to what happened. Okay, but ultimately responsibility goes all the way to the top. Even though you have team leadership and you might have screwed something up, you admit to what you screwed up, you try to figure out and you try to fix it. Hopefully you don't screw it up. But then it's still the same next echelon. Where did we screw up? A lot of times it's with communication. In a situation like that, I would hope it wasn't due to complacency. But the leadership is who's in charge. It's who ultimately makes the decisions, because they command us in the long run. At the very end of the day, we do what orders that they say. And if I'm doing the orders as they say it, and those things end up being wrong, it's still leadership's.
Thumbs up, Thomas. Well, good. I'm gonna jump in here, and that's gonna be a good springboard for us to go into the next guest. Unfortunately, that reaches us to our commercial break. So, Ross, I want to say thank you so much for having us on here. Your service to the country, both locally and domestically and on the foreign level, is greatly appreciated. I'm proud to have you as my brother. And for everyone else, stay tuned. We've got more guests coming on to talk about different aspects of both leadership and what went to play on this assassination attempt. And we've got 45 more minutes for you on Pivotal Change. So we'll be back after this break. Welcome back from the break, everyone. After our first guest, Ross Conn, talking about all of the more specific local responses and responsibilities during an event like this. And I want to now welcome you to Kevin Neal, a very good friend of mine. He is a retired Marine sniper. He was an E7 gunnery sergeant assigned to a sniper platoon, responsible for training other snipers, over 17 years in the marksmanship, counter sniper community. He has quite the resume. In addition, he served with me on the SWAT team at the Paducah Police Department and was our marksman sniper team leader for about 4 to 5 years there. He currently is in International Protective Services doing protection details all over the globe. And so, Kevin, I would like to welcome you to Pivotal Change. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Appreciate it, Ryan. Good to be here.
Well, what I'd like to do is, always because we're limited on time, is I want to jump right into things. And I want to start off with a little bit about not necessarily your background, but the background of snipers, as everyone refers to them. I know there's designated marksmen and other names for it. But as far as being trained and being prepared and being qualified as a sniper, counter sniper team, what goes into that? What does the American people need to know that preparations and training go in to make somebody qualified for that type of job?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, physical fitness. I mean, it's a very demanding uh, job, both in the military or even out in the civilian world. Marksmanship, you really have to have good fundamentals of marksmanship. Uh, Shoot a weapon, but understand the effects. Internal ballistics, your terminal ballistics, and external ballistics. So, under happens to the shooter behind the gun, and then the round as it's going down range before it hits the target, and then when it hits the target. So, um, and I remember when I was in, one of the prerequisites was a higher IQ. You have to be able to have some intelligence to understand what the mission is, what the requirement is, um, to get to your target. So it was very, it's not impossible, but there's a lot to it than just getting behind a gun and shooting paper.
Yeah, very good. So a lot of these teams, I remember when we would train together, we did some cross training where we came and did your PT test, we did your marksmanship test, and then you did our test. And I remember very vividly that every sniper could immediately step over to a tactical operator's position and pass that marksmanship test. And I believe on the first try, only two of us passed the marksmanship test for the sniper team with the running and everything involved, and that was very eye opening for us as how the dynamics change from just like you said, the average person having to be intelligent, make adaptations over time, and so these teams do go through a lot of training. So one of the things that I want to talk about too is like on an event like this, the intelligence, the pre planning, the preparation. These people are extremely capable of executing the job. What are some of the pre-event responsibilities for a counter sniper team? Like who has the final say of like where they're placed, what type of equipment they bring, because they could be shooting everything from 223, 556 to 308 to 338 Lapoulas or various rounds and stuff like that. Who gets the say on the manpower, the number of teams, and just how things are ultimately deployed at any event or setting of this nature?
Yeah, and again, a great question. When it comes to setting up what we call an FFP, a final firing position in the Marine Corps, that sniper is going to choose that position. And there's going to be several factors, obviously, that gives the best oversight, let's say, of a venue or a target area, so that they can clearly engage without obstructions. But they also want to be concealed in some cases. Some FFPs are when you really don't want to be in the open because of the nature of the event. They want to be seen, which is a good thing. It could be a deterrent. But the best FFP selection is by the sniper. Pre-event, you're looking at the actual terrain, key terrain features that could give advantageous to both the sniper and the enemy or a bad guy in this scenario, because that's a threat area. You identify those areas by train association. You go out and you do a pre-venue sweep of the area where you're going to be operating in. You gather a lot of intelligence, distances, angles, elevation. There's so many things that you get, concealment areas, and on a individual, but more so when it's combined as a brief, because you're gonna do a pre-deployment brief in detail, and all the agencies that are working together are going to put in mitigating factors. So if areas of concern are identified, then those leaders that are in charge are going to make decisions to where they can put in preventable, actionable items for those areas. And then the sniper themselves, they want to take up a position that can best protect, whoever it is that they are to be protecting. Um, so it's a broad area, a lot of information.
Yeah.
Um, so uh,
So let me
in
ask
this
a
situation, there's yeah.
let me ask an interjecting question here. So you said something very
Yeah.
important to me as I'm tracking and following along just the multiple steps, and immediately my brain jumps back to what you said about a higher level of intelligence. All of these considerations are far beyond what the normal person would look at. We'd be like, oh, look, there's a water tower, go up there. Okay, there's a high spot, go up there. You're talking about overt positions versus covert positions. And my question would be, let's say you go out in the field and you're in charge of this free operation scouting, and you said, in order to fully secure this event, we need 4 sniper teams in these 4 locations. Could somebody come to you, a supervisor up the chain of command, and say, sorry, you only get 3 teams? And then that's what you're stuck with. Is that a real world possibility?
Absolutely. And that's, when we're talking about leadership, understanding what's the go. If we're protecting, then if snipers who are trained, that they go out and they need to have overlapping fields of fire, and 4 sniper positions are going to give us that to be, at a minimum adequate to provide the protection that we need to provide. I may even say 5, to hires to let them know, hey, this is an area that, and it may be given information to the leadership saying, hey, this is not a very good venue. We need to have this much security. And then those leaders have to make those decisions. Do they have the assets and resources to make that happen?
Okay, so that was a good point.
That's a great question.
Yeah, clarified something for me really well, and I hope people hear that. We need to ask for the amount of resources, but you don't always get what you want, and so that can also
That's
result
right.
in failure of the mission as well. So let's talk about like on event responsibilities, because you just did this whole host of pre-event responsibilities. So now we have our final firing position. Our teams are in place. We've been allotted the resources that are now in the real world setting. In that moment, what is that sniper team's responsibilities? How early do they show up? How long do they stay there? And what's their real time, second by second, minute by minute responsibility?
Yeah, in the pre-brief, before deployment, all of these details are discussed. All parties, even adjacent units, everybody knows what the mission is. And each entity gives, the sniper is going to give their presentation. And so um, the, the biggest thing is once you call it actions on the objective, once you're out, sometimes the snipers go out before other elements that get there and they get set up. They may confirm or deny intelligence from what they previously had seen, but they're going to cover those areas. And the coordination with adjacent units or other units that are on the site venue as well are overlapping, because you want that overlapping of security. But the biggest thing is to do your pre-work presentation, and everybody that is supposed to be involved is, if you remember when we would go out and serve a search warrant, we all come in and we have a brief. Here's the plan of action. Here is the details in the lining as far as who's doing what, the who, what, when, where, and why. And so everybody knows. And then when you go out to execute on the actual venue or the objective, it helps the mission to be more successful. You're going to have scenarios where things just pop up, things change, from what's brief, and it makes it easier to the transition if need be.
So, Kevin, I want to pause
it's
you
key
right
for
there
leadership. Yeah.
because I want to talk more about those things that pop up and change in our second segment. So that's going to be really important as the viewers come back and watch. So, kind of 2 real quick back-to-back questions for you is, what is the standard communication while a team is deployed on scene? Like, how are they communicating to each other, to other entities, other elements of the protection detail? And how much is that interagency communication happening from the eyes in the sky, essentially, the Overwatch teams, the sniper teams?
Yeah. So again, there's a comms brief within the brief that I was talking about. So communications is brief. You're going to have multiple layers of. You'll have internal communication for each entity to and talk amongst themselves internally. You're going to have we call a channel where everybody from a particular section can monitor um, communications where everyone can get this. They don't necessarily have to talk on that channel. They just hear what's being said on that channel. Your snipers, you want them to have a direct line. There's different names, the FFP or the SEC, where the people that make decisions as information is being disseminated, and you can just imagine the multiple radio channels and a lot of information coming in, multiple agencies. Communications is extremely key because as a sniper, I may see something. Well, how do I relay that information to higher so that they can make the best decision that they can make? Um, Talking about other agencies, we had this in law enforcement. Probably the best example. We work off a certain frequency. The county works off of a totally different frequency. We did have a channel where we could share, but I got a radio one, and if I rotate to that frequency, then I'm off frequency. So those factors that are huge start to play in. So that's communications is probably the lifeline, is the easiest way to say it, as far as getting real-time information to the person that needs to have that information to make the best decision. And you're going to have problems.
I want to jump in on that comment right there, Kevin, because we are going to have to roll into our commercial break and then start our second segment. But communication is the lifeline. And interagency, and they're switching back and forth, and there's basically, metaphorically and physically speaking, the absolute necessity to keep your head on a swivel and pay attention to all these areas. And as those dynamics unfold, even on a calm day where there is no incident, they just exponentially compound when something pops up, a threat is discovered, an incident occurs. So everyone stay tuned. We're going to continue on with Kevin Neal here in just a minute after our break. We're going to get more pivotal change. And as you can see, all of these responsibilities, this preparation work, the communication, that's directly in line with businesses and not just sniper teams. So we're going to dig back into more critical elements of what happened over this assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump right after this break. So stay tuned. Welcome back from the break, everyone, to Pivotal Change. And we are jumping right back into our topic for tonight about leadership lessons and preparation and how we can learn from the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump from this last weekend. Again, with me on this series and session is Kevin Neal. He's a former and retired police sniper and a retired Marine sniper, a gunnery sergeant over a sniper platoon that trained other snipers, and he is currently in International Protective Services. So we're going to jump right back in and pick up where we left off. So we talked a lot about all of the prep, all of the training, what it takes to communicate and prepare and be on scene and be effective while overwatching and doing your role. But now we're going to talk about what if a potential threat comes. So if you have reports of a threat or you witness some suspicious behavior and that communication is working, how keyed in does a sniper team get to that threat? And how important is that two-man dynamic to additionally continue to scan for secondary or tertiary threats and not get too much tunnel vision? How do they do both?
Yeah, so depending on, you got the sniper's got the ability to zoom in. You're looking for identifiers on that individual that in some cases historically will tell you if they're carrying a bag, if they're by themselves. When you're in an event like this where there's a lot of people, typically that individual that's off in this situation outside the venue acting strange, there should be no reason why he has a laser or has a rangefinder. But that sniper is going to zoom in on him and get as much intel off of that individual, his person, his actions, so he can get that real-time information to hire, so those individuals can make the best decisions. Now, you and I know, our police officers, if the elements of deadly force apply, then the individual sniper obviously can take matters right then and there. But the gathering that intelligence to articulate that is key. The spotter is also communicating. Probably has if there is a spotter, he has a higher power scope to where he can zoom in and get more information. Maybe communicating to the other agencies that are in that secondary venue security, passing real-time information off to them, overwatching them as well, because those are the ones who are going to make the actual physical contact. And that, to me, that was key. That individual at a minimum should have had contact made. You and I know as police officers, hey, go over there and see what's going on. You make that physical contact with them, because we learn a lot from the individual when we talk to them. And all that is communicated and relayed through, in this case, the sniper who's got the equipment and the advantage from his FFP or his position to get that information and relay it to the people on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, the two-man team, that spotter has enhanced optics so he can see farther, he can communicate, and the one guy can stay locked in his position. And without that, the one guy has to be responsible for it all, and that's not a winnable situation. So let's talk about that threat. Like you said, you mentioned, hey, we've reached the indications that we need to use deadly force. One of the things that I want to ask is kind of who makes that call. You had said the sniper, if he obviously observes the use of deadly force to save a life and it's justified, take the shot. But what if there's a slightly different situation? This guy was laying in a sloped roof. There's dead space. What if I'm a ground officer yelling, he's got a gun, he's pointing it at the president, and all you can see is a head, no shoulders, no activity. You do not have the ability to witness firsthand he's got his line of sight on the president. Who can make the call to say, hey, take the shot? Can that shot be made from another person to say, sniper, please engage, green light, and the sniper then be justified to take that shot on the observations of another law enforcement officer?
Yeah, and I've actually been in those situations where you've got the elements of deadly force, you're passing that information on to hire the individual that would be the commander, the leader, the SWAT leader, to give the indication, all right, the elements are met, here's the green light, or they may just get more information, or, let's wait and see what he's going to do next. Those are the toughest situations to be in, and especially in this situation, the worst outcome has happened. The ultimate goal is to protect. The main reason why I'm there on the roof, or the snipers on the roof, is to provide protection for either, in this case, the former president or the protectee, whoever it is. Their main job is to provide protection for the individuals that are there. And some are easy. In my opinion, this would have been an easy one to make that decision, but I wasn't the one behind the gun. I don't know what the internal commands were. Could have been told, hey, you don't have the deadly force capability until you're told to. And there are those types of situations. I don't like working in those environments.
Right.
Again, going back to an intelligent sniper who can articulate and make those decisions to prevent something like this. That's what you're there for. Is it ugly in the business? Absolutely. But the goal is to protect, and we got to protect both sides. In this case, the information is limited, but what I've seen, the decision should have been made long before the shots were fired, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't say that with my professional opinion. I don't agree completely. The information, how accurate it is or not, was that the sniper had this target in sights and was calling for a green light, and was denied. But let's fast forward. The shot is taken. The threat is neutralized. What happens next? What does that sniper continue to do, or scan, or change? What happens to the personal protection detail that we witnessed on TV? Can you give us some of those dynamics and what happens not only in just those minutes after, but in those hours after, and then kind of in a little bit of the investigations and the debrief, because that sniper is going to have to, and everyone that responded to that scene is going to have to give a whole lot of reporting and information and interviewing to resolve this. Can you answer some of those questions for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Debrief. Everyone involved is going to be writing statements to, you want to get a detailed description and statement as far as what happened. But the shots downrange, target is taken, target threat. You're always looking for that secondary threat. You still have to have elements to move to make direct contact. So therefore, you're providing overwatch for their movement. It doesn't stop there. So their duties shifted to still provide overwatch for those elements that were going to go make contact. Apparently, it was a situation where this guy got up on the roof, but others had to get up. So snipers, they were definitely working until those that made contact got on the radio and communicated, okay, the scene secured. So now, because you got another scene now, that being a
well, let me jump in
situation.
Here
now
also,
you got to,
because I know we're getting a little bit closer to our break. So I want people to be able to take a good message away from this too, because you're talking about how they're just going to continue to keep working the interviews, the debriefs. That leads me in kind of thinking of like, well, how do we prevent this from happening again? What happens to make a change get implemented where this cannot happen again? But I want you to blend that answer with the lessons learned from this and making changes to correct failures. Apply that to the business world, to the leaders, to people that are going out there and having influence. How can we go through the process of implementing change, and I'll apply that with a bigger blanket?
Yeah, and that to me is the $1 million question, because we can pre-brief, we can discuss actions on the objective. When we're actually out there, and this involves in any business that you do, if you get your people together, you talk about, here's what we're going to do. If you don't follow your plan of action each time, there's always going to be changes as the plan is being executed. But at the end of the day, you got to have confidence in those who are trained, in this case, a sniper. The amount of training that we go through, you got to have confidence in them. They understand the rules of engagement. They understand deadly force. If there is a threat, and the individual sniper is given real-time information, and somebody in the leadership position, outside of other information they may not know, but in this situation, you've got a threat on the venue. The leadership is key to give that individual the green light to do his craft, do his workmanship. In business, if you teach your employees that you trust them to be great for back that by letting them make decisions. You set the parameters, as far as here's what I allow you to work within. If decisions outside this box need to be made, notify me with the most detailed information that you can, so I can make the best decision as a leader. But if there is a continuous failure on that leadership area, and I hammer leadership because I've been in that position, you've got to make great decisions. They don't have to be the right decision all the time, but they got to be great decisions. Your people have to feel that they have the trust and confidence of their
let me jump in
here
on that.
Is a perfect example.
Because we're coming up kind of hard to our commercial break, and I want to thank you for coming on. But that trust and confidence, you said, trust the people to do their craft, trust the people you've trained to put in the position, communicate the boundaries and expectations you have for them, and as a leader, you make the decisions that are going to make them successful. Kevin, we do have to take a hard break. I just want to thank you dearly, my friend, for coming on the show and explaining this to us, making it applicable to all of us. even outside the realm. And for everyone else that's watching, that was Kevin Neal. If you want to be able to look him up, you can get in contact with us after the show, and we'll get you to his brain so you can learn some more expertise from him. But stay tuned for our final guest of the evening. We're going to talk about more of the large-scale operational command and emergency management in situations like this. So stay tuned on Pivotal Change. Welcome back to Pivotal Change, everyone, for our last segment of the night. We've had some really great discussion and some really incredible insights that most of us are really not aware of that goes into all kinds of scenarios like this. One of the things I want to do is I want to end this segment with our final segment of the night with a very dear friend of mine, Rob Estes. To tell you a little bit about Rob Estes, well, there's no little bit about him. He has done so much in his life, and he's responsible for a large part of who I am through the training of law enforcement, through the training of emergency responders, and in all kinds of categories. He has a resume that could probably roll down the floor at you, but he is currently positioned and the director of emergency management over McCracken County. So that's things like responding to natural disasters, response to active shooter events, missing people, all kinds of things, just the critical elements that would go wrong in municipalities and in counties. This is the guy, this is the coordinator that goes over that. And obviously he's going to lend us a lot of influence on today's topic. So Rob, welcome to Pivotal Change.
Thanks, Ryan. It's good to be here. Thank you so much. You're too kind.
Well, I can't be too kind with you, sir. So what I want to do is I want to jump right in it because we've only got about 12 minutes left on the show. So
Sure.
with your large scale mindset, I want to look at what does it take to get into a large scale preparations that go into place for an event like this? How are counties and municipalities going to be able to assist and plan? What's their side of the story in getting ready for something like this?
You know, the planning starts when we get the notification. It is a large scale. There's notifications of all the first responders that are going to be involved. All the stakeholders are going to be involved. There's hospitals that come into play. It's everything that you can think of that we're going to make the notifications, the location. We're going to start with routes. We're going to start, especially with my job, I'm going to start looking for resources that we're going to need and to get those resources into play. And the sooner that we know, the better we know. So it's easier to get the resources that we may need to make this a successful event.
Okay, so the notification, the first time you realize an event is going to land in your territory, immediately preparations begin. Okay, so that's really good. So in an event like this, you have personally been involved in protection details of vice presidents, presidential nominees, presidents themselves, senators, just various VIPs. So in some of those experiences, what's the average timeline where you get the formal contact that says, hey, not only is the event going to be here, but what's the timeline that you're going to start actual communications with an event like this? How far out before boots are actually in the city on the ground making preparations?
You know, it varies according to who the VIP or the dignitary is going to be. Of course, one of the last ones that I was involved in was with President George Bush when he came to town. And when he came into our town, it was probably 6 weeks beforehand. The Secret Service came with their boots on the ground, their advanced team, about 2 weeks out. I was attached and a liaison with them as onto the intelligence section of the Secret Service. And so we did a lot in the preparation just to make sure there was, you know, the safety of the president was, you know, important. That's all we did. We went around looking for any type of a threat that was possible, and that from either environmental being the weather that it's going to be. We went to the National Weather Service. We went all the way to anybody that had made a threat to the president, and we paid them a visit. And that's a lot that goes into it beforehand.
And a lot more than what people would think would be inside the normal realm. We talk about planning for rain and weather and things like that, not just where we're going to put the bleachers and make a pretty picture. But you mentioned being a liaison, and that really launches me kind of into the next question about communication. The communication that has to happen in an event like this for it to unfold, the communication before, during, and after. I know you just gave us kind of a timeline of how far out, weeks in advance, but ultimately, who is communicating with whom and how is that happening?
You know, of course, you'll have like their special agent in charge who's going to be communicating with our chief and our command staff. And then it goes down. They also have people who are supervising the intelligence section. or their tactics team. I know that your guest today, Kevin Neal, we were together on one of these when President Bush came to town, and their tactics their section immediately got in contact with him, and there was things that they had to do to prepare, and he was assisting them. And so it trickles down, and it's really nice because they assign one person, and so you're contacting one person, and you exchange cell phones, and it's good that way for the communication. And that's that's the before the event. And during the event, I was the inner perimeter, another detective was assigned to the outer perimeter. In the inner perimeter, I was dressed exactly like, well, not exactly, but I was wearing a suit, just like the Secret Service. They had the earpiece for me. They had, the pin of the day that you pin on, and that on your suit gets you to where you're allowed to go. I wore that set that I had my radio with my comms on the inner, with inside the inner perimeter. Another detective was in the outer perimeter, and we were monitoring our police channel. And so we were able to communicate with them. We were always in close proximity to a Secret Service agent. And then we were able to relay information back and forth, pertinent information they allowed us to, because there was certain information that I was hearing being with him that I was not going to put on an open channel. And so it was back and forth, but the communication before that was wonderful. It was tremendous. And then you say after, I was lucky to have my one that I was liaisoned with, that Secret Service agent called back, and we talked about the things that were good and the bad that went on, and how the next time they come to town, we could work better together. It was really a good experience with the Secret Service on that particular day.
Yeah, I love the way you did that. And I've caught a couple of things that I want to draw out. Maybe you make another comment on, but I heard you say that there's various channels of communication. You had your local comms, you're a city police officer at the time, a detective that was assigned as the liaison, like you said. So you had your operational comms to talk to local law enforcement. You had access to the Secret Service comms, both personal, face-to-face communication. Then you traded cell phones for some of that informal stuff that doesn't necessarily need to go out in the air. And then, of course, the radio for that more direct communication. Leading me kind of to my next point, the change of plans. If something happens in an event of this nature, where there's a president or presidential nominee, senator, secretary of state, and they want to change plans, or something else, a stimulus causes a change of plans, what's the domino effect there? What's the communication? How does that unfold?
There's always change of plans. Nothing will ever go, no matter how much you plan for it to go perfect. It will never ever go perfect. With President Bush, he landed. Air Force One landed. He was supposed to get out of the plane, get into his limo, drive about 400 yards to the event, and then get out and walk in, and it was all covered. Well, in typical President Bush fashion, he got out and made a phone call in the car and got out and said, "It's a beautiful day. Let's walk." Well, all of a sudden, that scattered everybody. The radio started cracking. We got out. They told me what position to get into, and we walked and went around the president and got around him and walked him to the event. And it was, the communication on that was, I wasn't allowed to notify the outside on open mic that we're walking, of course, but that all came through, and it was pandemonium for a second, because he's the president of the United States and he's not going to wait. It's, we're coming to him really quick. So everybody's getting out of Suburbans, getting around him, and we walk him into the event that way. And President Bush just wanted to talk to every one of us on the way there. He was tremendous to be around.
So I like what you're saying there. And I've heard not only your stories, but others of being able to meet presidents, and specifically President Bush, and some funny stories that unfortunately we don't have time for today. But
Sure.
The important part that you said is there was a pandemonium moment, which for me, I think that probably is more displayed to the audience, that it was kind of the duck on the water. The adaptation made by the Secret Service, the detectives, the perimeters, they all probably did it fairly smoothly based on what any
Yes.
objective observer would do. And they did it instantaneously because those communications were in place. And even though inside your heart and inside your mind, you're fluttering and flurrying and you're looking for all kinds of new threats, even though you're scouted and familiar with the area, a change of plans gets the people responsible heightened really quick. So in an event like the assassination attempt, how those communications should, and we're assuming are in place based on the knowledge we have on time, but quick pivots and quick change of plans should be able to unfold. even on the large scale of people from the perimeter to the inner perimeter to even the body of the president. And so it's very interesting to know that that is normal behavior for that. So here we've got
It's
just a couple of few minutes. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, when something like that happened, it's different from the original plan, but it's not something we haven't done before. And so it's
Correct.
nothing we're panicking for.
You're trained. So that's a huge part of that, is you've prepared mentally and physically with training to be able to make those adaptations. So there is actually no true panic or chaos on the scene. So on that large scale, what if something breaks down? How do the event leaders respond? What is the leader's roles and responsibilities on the grander scale? Like you said, the Secret Service agent in charge, or in an event like the other day, there was a emergency management director, just like you're, a slightly different title up there in Pennsylvania. But what are their responses and duties in that moment where, hey, we're making a change, or something is broken loose, a threat or an actual incident? What's the reactions there?
Everybody, of course, the number one plan and the number one thing that we do is in an event like that is to protect the president. And then the secondary is to protect life. There was a lot of failures on that incident right there that happened. But as far as everything going, we start planning at the very beginning. We say, this is how we want the event to happen. This is our perfect, best weather, best everything environment that we have that we can put it in. And then we start working our way backward, and we start what ifing, and we go to the worst case scenario. So when something breaks loose and something doesn't happen, we've already went over it, mentally prepared for it. We put different things in place that we can fall back on so that we are prepared and we can execute.
Yeah, that's very good. So I'm going to recap just a couple of things here real quick before I move kind of into our last question of the evening, and we close out the show. But we're looking at the dynamics of the whole thing, and you did a great job bringing everything to us. Like, again, the terrain, the weather, the timing, the locations, the spread, the layers, the communication, and I appreciate everything that you did. But ultimately, this comes down to a leadership show, and a lot of us as entrepreneurs and business owners. So take all of the things that we discussed in the last several minutes, and can you apply that to how does this affect a business owner that's trying to communicate better or structure better or layer better? But where can we get your nugget of wisdom to apply this to leaders that are not directly in law enforcement and government operations?
Never become complacent. We, according to what the media and everything that we've seen that we know of to this point, it seems like there was some complacency with this last event, and never become complacent. Always strive and always plan, always communicate. And when you communicate, make sure that everybody knows what your expectations are. If you do not communicate clearly your expectations, then you cannot expect them to be followed. You cannot expect to be successful if what you want is not communicated clearly and everybody has a defined responsibility.
Wow, Rob, that was truly beautifully articulated and well said. We have the saying from our old career that complacency kills. And I just want to say that that was a wonderful message. The entire show tonight has been based around making leaders better from a terrible incident that we have. If somebody, for any reason, wanted to get a hold of you and that wonderful brain of yours that is so tactically and logistically minded, how could somebody reach out to you and say, hey, Rob, I want to tap into your brain?
You can look up the McCracken County Emergency Management Facebook page. We're on Twitter. You can also look us up at the McCracken County. If you just do a Google search of McCracken County, Kentucky, look up emergency management, you'll find all my contact information. Reach out to me at any time. It's got all my information, and I'd be more than willing to help anybody, do anything I can. That's in my nature. That comes from all those years that we were training together, Ryan.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And everyone, stay tuned. We'll all get next time, Thursday, 6 p.m. Central, same time, to Pivotal Change. And just remember, everyone, go out there and see the change and be the change.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.